Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Yesterday I flew into Ontario. I'm finally feeling a little bit more settled, and today I was like, I need to figure out the between the waves thing, because where I left the last vlog was basically that I know what needs to be fixed, but I still don't know how to fix it. I'm currently on a walk. I'm either gonna go to a cafe or I'm gonna go back to my grandparents' house, and I'm gonna sit down, no computer, no distractions, nothing besides my between the waves writing notebook. And I'm just gonna like set some sprints and do some brain dumping, word vomiting, just like basically throwing out all the ideas I can possibly think of, and also reminding myself as usual that I can change things if I want to and that I will probably need to. Also, if you're new here, my name's Kayla. I'm a writer and just creative person. I currently have one poetry collection that is published, so if you're interested you can purchase that on Amazon. And yeah, if you're into writing and vlogs and also outdoor stuff, I've been doing a lot more outdoor videos, then feel free to subscribe and check out some of my other videos. So yeah, I'm gonna continue with my walk and we're gonna get this between the waves character arc backstory situation figured out. I swear, today is for figuring this out, and I'm gonna do everything I can just to get myself in a better place with that. I just got back. I use the Forest app all the time to like track writing sprints, work sprints, whatever. And one of my favorite things is that over the holidays, it like updates the little trees that you can plant so that they're holiday themed. I mean, specifically Christmas themed, like this one that has like there's snow on the trees now, and normally they're not like that. And it genuinely gets me excited to write. So I'm gonna do a 20-minute sprint of brain dumping. I've got my notebook, I've got the Christmas tree on, and an afternoon coffee, which I know might be a bad idea. It also seems like it's nighttime. It's not. It's just because it's so dark here. But I'm gonna sit down and just like brain dump ideas for how to fix the issues with this book, and kind of like ideas for the backstory and what I want to change and what I want to update. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, let's discuss. I did do a 20-minute sprint. This is all I wrote for that 20-minute sprint. To be fair, I got distracted a couple times, so I'm sure it was only like a 10 or 15-minute sprint at the end of the day, but so I didn't have my laptop, and I told myself I couldn't like look anything up on the internet just because I get distracted too easily. So instead, I was writing notes, but as I went, there were basically certain things that I made a note of. So the first thing I said, Google types of character wounds. So like I did a brain dump, but I kind of highlighted with these numbers the steps that I needed to take after I finished the sprint, because the issue that I'm facing right now is something that affects the entire novel. So for me, it's been quite the struggle to actually look at it on a smaller scale. Like I keep trying to view the problem and look for solutions that are much larger scale, and like kind of look at the whole story from a distance. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but basically I was just looking at it at like the bigger picture when I needed to be looking at tiny little details. So as you guys know, I have the draft 4 plan that's basically, it has some big questions like solidifying Amaya's backstory and solidifying the context around the Third Realm and Amaya's family and the history of her family. And what I started to realize is that even those questions that seem a bit more targeted and like a bit smaller scale were still way too large scale. Like developing Amaya's backstory still had to come from somewhere, you know? Like I couldn't just sit down and develop the backstory. I needed to start from somewhere. that was smaller. I needed like an even smaller bite-sized piece to start with. And what that piece ended up being is a character wound. So generally a character wound is something traumatic, I'd say, that happened to the character at some point throughout their life before the story started that has now affected how they react to certain situations. It's usually the situation or the thing that happened that becomes a pivotal moment and like gives them their flaws and just makes them act the way that they do. And that character wound is also the thing that they have to not necessarily overcome, but it's the thing that they need to like fight against. And as I was doing this, I realized that I didn't have one for Amaya, and it was confusing to me, and I didn't look there first because I used to have one for her. Like, I specifically remember what it was. It was a certain type of betrayal by a character that doesn't even exist in this draft anymore, in a situation that no longer exists in this world. And so much of that initial character wound that I had set up for her was trickling into this draft and basically just skewing the entire thing so that things were inconsistent. And even though I changed the draft so much away from that original character wound, I didn't change it in a way that supported a new character wound because I never came up with a new character wound. I still had somewhat of a backstory, but I didn't have the thing that actually like made her act the way that she did, like that pivotal moment that created Amaya as she is and gave her the problems and the flaws that she has to overcome in the story. So as you can imagine, not having that is a problem, and it is the main problem, because that's the thing as well, is that once I have a character wound, there are certain ways that I can set up the familial history and the world building and like the third realm where Amaya lives. There are things that I can change that would support her arc starting at a specific character wound so much better. And obviously I haven't done that, and she hasn't really had that growth that she needs to have because I don't know where she's starting from. Hopefully that makes sense. It is 11:15, which is kind of late for me, but in Vancouver it wouldn't be that late, so my brain's a little bit confused, and I'm hoping that I've explained it properly. Hopefully you understand what I mean. Moral of the story is that my main character doesn't have a character wound, and therefore she has nothing for me to build her flaws and her strengths and her reactions and her arc off of. Like, I don't have that foundation, which is why step one was to Google types of character wounds, because I initially had a betrayal. I think that it should be slightly different, but I think it'll still be along the lines of like a betrayal, because I think that part still works with the story. And then I just need to actually like change her actions so that it matches up with that. And then step two was to develop that new wound. And then step three was to create history of Amaya's family to better align with the new wound and what's happened to her. So I have been looking through character wounds and kind of like how that works. And I think once I've kind of figured that out and confirmed like this is still the type of wound, the type of trauma that she's going to have, I would like to write that moment happening, because this is like, it's so important and I don't have it anymore. And in the previous drafts, I wrote that entire betrayal scene. Like, I had the whole thing written out before even writing the draft. So basically the next step is to traumatize my main character. And then from there, we'll correct all of the other overarching questions so that they align better with that wound, and so that they align in a way that makes her arc healing from that wound and her positive character arc a lot stronger. It's been a long day of staring at a blank page and thinking things through and just not having any clue of what I need to do, and then like 10 lines and more thinking of me figuring it out. So it's been a day. I'm gonna have some more tea. I might do some more work on this, honestly, because I would really like to set myself up to be able to write this scene tomorrow. Also because I just haven't written in a very long time. But if I do that tonight, I'll probably just give myself like 15 minutes or so, because I also really need to like have a stretch or some breath work or just something. So I've basically been gone all day because I was visiting more family and just didn't have much time to do writing, but I did have to drive for about an hour today. And while I was doing that, I started listening to another podcast, just kind of like catching up on my learning, especially around character wounds and arcs, because as you heard from Kayla of last night, who was quite tired and having a hard time explaining what she meant, I have basically come to the conclusion that the most important place for me to start right now is figuring out Amaya's character wound, because that is something that changed, and it changed the entire story without me really keeping track of it. And that is like the little detail that needs to be fixed in order to fix the rest of the issues, because that's the foundation that I need to be building off of. So I've been trying to like learn things and listen to podcasts around that topic so that I can kind of get things figured out a bit better. And today the inspiration hit. I ended up dictating into my notes app 1,880 words explaining Amaya's character arc and how I wanted it to change, like how I wanted her reactions and her feelings and her just the way that she sees the world. I figured out how I want that to change throughout the entire first book, but I also figured out how I wanted that character arc and that wound to morph at the end of the first book in order to get into the second book. So now I have a very strong beginning of a character arc for her for the second book, and I also have the midpoint. The midpoint for the second book just randomly came out at me. I was just doing so much dictation and the ideas were flowing and things were making sense. I've got the wound figured out. I still need to write the scene for it though, which is something that I think is going to be really important to me, because I think that like wounds are generally traumas or pivotal moments in your life that affect the rest of your life. Like they affect the way that you react and the way that you move through the world, and they affect how your story will play out. So for me, I think it's really important for me to have a really clear picture of what that wound looked like to her, like what happened to her exactly that caused her to be like this. So I still need to write the actual scene for that, but I've got it figured out, and I've also got just a ton of other stuff as far as the character arc goes. And it was such an exciting moment because it's one of those moments where you're like, oh, well, maybe it should be this. And then it would make sense because it would tie into this over here. And then I get to keep this part that I really love because it would actually strengthen what I'm trying to do with the character in the first place. And like, sometimes the puzzles just fall into place in a better way than they had the first time you went through the process of creating the story, which I guess is why editing is so important. The progress done today, I'm so happy with, and I feel so much better, and I'm excited because this kind of character wound and her arc that has just become so much clearer to me, especially even leading into the second book, just makes me feel so much closer to my main character, so much closer to Amaya and the journey that she's going to go through, and it makes me feel more excited about it and like I can do it better justice than I have been. So it's very exciting. I digress. I need to go to bed. I just wanted to close off this video because it's going to go up tomorrow. Honestly, I think I'm going to be writing a lot over Christmas, so stick around for that. There's definitely going to be vlogs. But thank you all for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.